you an expert, entrepreneur, or small business owner passionate about helping people through life's transitions? The Fresh Starts Expert membership is perfect for you. For just $55 per month, this dynamic membership is designed to boost your business and amplify your brand. Fresh Starts is here to provide you with business development, marketing, coaching, networking, publicity, community engagement, and more. With an SEO-optimized profile, exclusive press opportunities, and weekly co-working and business coaching sessions, you'll connect, grow, and gain visibility like never before. Are you ready to elevate your brand? We can't wait to work with you. Visit freshstartsregistry.com and become a Fresh Starts expert today.
Welcome back to A Fresh Story, the podcast where we have conversations about brave decisions to start over again. I'm Olivia.
And I'm Jenny, and we're so glad you're here today.
Cindy DiTiberio is a writer, editor, and former ghostwriter who has worked in publishing for 20 years. She writes the Substack The Motherload, which I love, a feminist exploration of motherhood, marriage, and divorce, and her writing has appeared in The Lily, Scary Mommy, Literary Mama, and more. Her memoir, Ghost, is forthcoming, and I'm super excited to have Cindy here. I feel like we connected in kind of like multiple roads on the internet. Like we bumped into each other. I feel like it's like a target of the internet, and we like kind of bumped into multiple aisles together. And so I was featured in The Motherload talking about my divorce, and you do such a beautiful job in The Motherload of writing about the honest side of parenting and divorce right now and all the things. And you have a really, I want to say, a really big following. A lot of people read you. It's pretty impressive, Cindy. So we're just really honored that you're here today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's so exciting to talk in real time because we
I know.
It feels like friends. Those are the best kind of friends, though. I've really
the best
like
conversations.
The connections you make on the internet. They become
It's
very
so true.
real.
It's so true.
They
it's
really
so true.
do. How are you doing today? I'm good. Got kids off to school, and I'm in Palo Alto where it's usually like sunny and warm, but we actually have like some cloudy weather, which makes it feel like fall, which is always kind of nice.
Yeah.
We don't get a whole lot of seasonal feelings here. So it's a good day.
That's lovely.
I love that. Well, why don't you take us back to the beginning of your Fresh Start story?
Yeah. I thought about this a lot when I was thinking about coming on here. And, I think a lot of people, and even maybe you guys would think that, okay, my fresh start is this divorce I've been talking a lot about on my Substack. But I actually think my fresh start happened in 2022. Sometimes I wonder too, I turned 40 right in February of 2020. So I turned 40, the pandemic happens, and like nothing about my life is the same. I don't know if I think 40 is a really powerful time for women. And I think part of me is like, this was going to happen anyway in terms of this like awakening. But the pandemic definitely impacted it in that like it forced us all into our homes. It forced me to like really look at my marriage. I also stopped ghostwriting during the pandemic because I had a kindergartner and a third grader who were, of course, doing remote school. And so I had a book that was due in May of 2020, and I finished writing that book. And then I was like, I can't keep doing this. This is insane. Like, to write, you have to have focus time, not
quiet time.
And so I stopped working. And I think a big part of my fresh start came from stopping that job, which I now look back and I see that ghostwriting allowed me to avoid myself because I was always having someone else in my brain. And I was telling their story and I was focused on their things. And it was a great job and I really loved it, but it removed me from myself.
Yes.
And so when I stopped writing for other people, I could hear my own voice for the first time.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, oh, maybe I am not okay. Maybe I'm not happy. Maybe this life I've crafted for myself isn't working. And so sometimes I wonder, like, if the pandemic didn't happen and I just moved on to the next project and like blind on whether I'd still be in that way.
Yeah.
But the pandemic happened and I started to hear myself. And so what my fresh start was, so I was, I'd been doing individual therapy. I started that when my youngest started kindergarten, because of course, as moms, we don't have time for ourselves until our kids finally go to school. I'd been in individual therapy, and then we had been in couples therapy for about a year. And it just like things were still not getting better. I was still really unhappy, but I felt really trapped and I did not know what to do.
Yeah.
And so I ended up doing MDMA therapy. Which, if you don't know, it's using like essentially ecstasy is the drug, but you use it in a very therapeutic setting. Right. So you have a therapist, you meet with them ahead of time, you have an intention for what you're going in for. And then you do it, you're like laying down with an eye mask on. And it's an inner journey. It is not like you're at the club having all this fun. Right. You go in, and it was, for me, my life before MDMA therapy is Cindy 1.0, and my life after that therapy is Cindy 2.0. Like, I'm not the same person. It was it changed everything about my life. And it really, so what it can do is it can get you underneath the protective barriers that keep you from yourself, really, which, listen, we go through hard things, we do things to protect ourselves. And so I had all these protective layers on top. And which was why I couldn't figure out what to do in my marriage, because people would say, as they asked me, well, what do you want? I would be like, what are you talking about? I have no idea what I want. I have not been raised to ask myself that question. It's never really mattered what I wanted. Like, why are you asking me that? I don't know what I want. And so doing that therapy allowed me to figure out what I wanted, which ultimately, there is so much. I did 3 journeys, which my therapist required, because like the medicine really kind of unfolds. It's like a very powerful, like it starts and then it just like spreads.
Interesting.
And so I did 3 of them, but really it was MDMA therapy that allowed me to leave my marriage, because without it, it wasn't on the table. I couldn't leave. What are you talking about? No. A good girl
you were like not introspective. You weren't having that like.
Yeah.
I have questions. So we have an expert that does ketamine assisted therapy, and we one day had her on and we were just chatting with her and we were like, can you explain to us what that is? And I think that most people, my mind was kind of blown when you actually find out like what, like the logistics of what it looks like. So can you walk us a little bit through the logistics of what it looks like, what the aftercare looks like how many months you like how far apart the sessions are?
Yeah. So, my practitioner required, I want to say it was like maybe 3 in-person sessions with her before she would take me in the medicine as a way to establish trust with her. Because like, listen, like it's a vulnerable state to be like, oh. And so we did 3 in-person sessions. And again, that's also the time when you really figure out, like, why are you going in? Like, what are you doing this for? And for me, again, I was having a lot of trouble in my marriage. I was unhappy. I had finally identified during the pandemic that I'm an anxious person. I think we were all anxious during the pandemic, but I was like, oh, wait, I'm anxious. So I was thinking about going. Yeah. Like before I was like, I'm not anxious. I just really like, have things.
Yeah. I wonder if you were the least anxious person in a family of anxious people, so you became the non-anxious one. Yeah.
Yeah. That could very well be it. Because like in comparison, I don't know. I'm fine. I'm the full one.
Yep.
So I had been thinking about doing SSRIs because, but I had read Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, which is such an interesting book. I mean, it's like a tome of like a lot of pages. I had read it when it came out in 2018 and been so fascinated. And so I think I had always been kind of a little bit interested, but instead of going on SSRIs, which you're then on for a while, I was like, well, what if I try this medicine, which, you know, they say that for people, you do it and then you don't have to be on SSRIs anymore.
Yeah.
The other thing I will say about, I'm not sure if with ketamine, but with MDMA, you can't actually be on SSRIs and do the therapy because it's blocked, right?
Oh, interesting.
That makes
So all of that made me be like, well, I'm going to try this first before I go on to something else. And so my intention actually ended up being, why don't I feel safe? That was my question, because like, why am I anxious? Like, where is this anxiety coming from? Like, it doesn't even make a whole lot of sense. My big question was, why am I not safe? And so, and my therapist also required at least 6 weeks between the sessions.
Okay.
And so like a session, a journey, which is what they call it, you like start first thing in the morning, you don't eat anything. Like I usually started about 9:30. You would go in and it would be a little bit like a ceremony. Like you'd sit, like have a moment, there would be energy clearing, and then you'd take the medicine and then you'd wait for it to enter your system. And you usually like lay down with the blindfolds on, and there's music, which for me, the music is a really big part of it. I'm like super affected by music anyway, but, and then you just lay there for like 4 hours and 4 to 6 hours. They don't really know how long it's going to be, and you see what comes. And what's really interesting is that like, for me, it's not self-generated. I mean, it is self-generated. Your deeper self is what's
your subconscious.
Yeah. So it's like another layer of self that you get access to. For me, it was very cinematic, like very like these things would just come and I would be like super involved in it. I'm pretty, in that first one, I was very quiet. Like people wonder with your therapist, like, are they helping you? Are they leading you? No, my therapist was literally just there to support. If I needed anything, she'd check in with me. I'd hear her voice from like another realm being like, how's it going in there? And I'd be like, good. She'd be like, do you need anything? And I'd be like, nope. And I just like, it was so internal. It was really interesting. And each journey was slightly different and I would need her a little bit more. But so my first one was in June, and then my third one was in October. Okay. So it was really, and in between sessions, you go and you meet with your therapist and you unpack some of what happened.
Because
and for
your
me,
mind is changed for those 6 weeks. Like it sticks with you. It's not just those 4 hours.
Yes, it keeps kind of like unfolding. Like the medicine just keeps working. And so you'll have a dream or you'll have this insight. It like is like the pieces of the puzzle kind of coming together after the session. So the work in between is almost as important, because then you're finally like taking the content and trying to figure out what it means for your life. And so for me, my second journey is when I got to the very inconvenient truth, which was that I wanted to leave my marriage. And I was shocked. I couldn't believe that, but it was so clear. I was like, oh, I want to be done. And it's funny because in MDMA, you're like still feeling, even with like devastating information, you still feel very like good about it. Which is kind of some of its powers. You can see very traumatic things, but still like be okay. Which is why it's so powerful for that kind of work. And so, I was like, oh, I want to leave. And it, it just, I wasn't expecting that. I went into the medicine trying to fix me so that I could save my marriage. That's the whole thing, was like, there's something wrong with me. I'm too anxious. We got to fix me. Oops. That's not
I was going to ask what your partner thought of it. Like, did he support you doing that?
Yes. Yeah, he was. Because again, I think, we had reached a crossroads in our marriage. It was like, what are we going to do? Like, and I couldn't name what I wanted to do. So we were just kind of like stuck. So I think he saw too that there was something like that I needed help accessing myself, what I wanted. So he was very supportive of it. But it was upsetting for us both to have it be like, this therapy actually means the end of my marriage. And I wonder if that's actually a pattern. I don't know. I don't think enough people are talking about it. But I would guess
start the conversation here. Like, let's go. Let's hear.
Well, psychedelics and we leave our marriages.
I mean,
well, I think that like, I know my sister, the pattern of introspection of I have to fix me because I'm broken for him. I must fix me. Oh no, everything's broken and I'm okay. Actually, that's not unusual. Like that's how Olivia's, your marriage lasted like one therapy?
I started talk therapy and then my marriage was over and 1 month later. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I have a question though, Cindy. When you're lying there and all these things are coming to you, how do you remember all those things?
Great question.
I mean, I remember every single thing that happened.
That's fascinating.
Which is fascinating because, like, in a 4-hour chunk,
that would be my anxiety. My anxiety would be, I'm going to wake up and then I'm not going to be remembering to tell my therapist the stuff.
Yes. So that's the other thing the therapist does. So she stays in the room and she writes down anything you want her to know. She calls it, mine calls it like throwing rubies up from the mine. Like you're going in deep and you're going to throw up the jewels. So if there was something I wanted her to know, I would say it and then she would write it down. So that if that does happen, because sometimes some of the other journeys were a little bit more weren't as so seared in my memory. The first one for me, I was just like, I remembered everything. But some of the others, I needed a little bit more prompting. And so she would write, she had the notes and she would send it to me later about what I said and what we did and what happened at different times. So you do have notes to kind of help you through it. And some of this stuff is also like not, I mean, they call it like titrating, I think. It's like when you're in it, like sometimes you're in this like very intense moment of memory or realization. And then you'll like go, for me, so a lot of this for me was like inner little girl work, like my inner little girl who had gone into hiding. And she would go want to run and play in the field. Just go and run. And so sometimes you just needed to like give your psyche a break. And like let loose. And then you would go into another scene. And so it is, I mean, again, it's very spiritual boo-woo, but like it is no joke. And it has been really, really powerful in my life. And I will say though too, like, I mean, I'm such a proponent for it because it really did change my life. But I will also say I was ready for it because I had done a lot of work. I'd done everything else. And I was like, nothing else had worked. And so I did it in a moment of true desperation. Like, I got nothing else to try. I don't know if you've not done enough of, I guess I would call it like tilling of the soil to get yourself ready to go in. It may not be as effective because I was like, I've tried everything. Then it was like, I was ready. It was all like right there waiting for me.
Well, there has to be like an element of trust in yourself too, right? Because like, otherwise, I would imagine maybe some people are like, well, that thought came to me from something else, or like that it isn't my internal, thing is coming up or whatever. Like you kind of have to understand like it is coming from you to you.
Right. Yes. And I will say that was one of the hardest parts of this work is that you do have to trust yourself because you are the generator of the content. Like there's no one else with a 5-point plan. And I think we're taught to look outside of ourselves for answers, for healing, all of that. But this work and a lot of the work that I've been doing, I am the only expert on how to heal myself. Like I'm the only one. And so the way I've learned now is to listen to those inclinations that we have, which even doing the psychedelics was like an internal, like, I'm really interested in that. Wow. Even as I'm reading this book, I'm feeling like all these things. Why? I'm not going to do that, am I? But like, it didn't go away. That inclination, that interest stayed. And so I think for me, the healing is when you learn to listen to those nudges. Sometimes they're just like a one-off and they go away. But if they stay, that is a sign. And you're like, okay, I still, I guess, really want to do psychedelics or whatever it is. Or, you know, one of my really, right before my third journey, I realized, so I said my inner little girl would go to this field and it was her happy place. And so I would learn to also sometimes take her there, right? Like, so I'd be like, okay, let's go there. And so I realized one day that field was a field in Yosemite. Like it was an actual place. And I live in Palo Alto. So it's like a 3-hour drive to Yosemite. And I was like, what if I took her there? Like, what if I just drove us to the field she loves? And it stayed with me. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And so I drove her there, and it was like this moment. I wasn't sure if I was ready to go into the medicine again. And when I took her there, she got stronger, and she was like, we're ready. And it was like so powerful. So that's what I mean about like, you learn to trust yourself, which is super uncomfortable for us, I think, as women, because it's not what we're taught.
No.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. If we can start to really like, that's when we leave our marriages, is we can say, hey, guess what? I am the authority. Yeah. It doesn't matter what other people think about this. I feel like I want to leave. I'm going to leave.
That's a good enough reason.
Yeah. Good enough reason. Exactly.
Actually going to Yosemite is something only a writer would do, by the way. Right? Like only a writer would be like, I'm going to take my inner child to Yosemite. But I want to say a few things. I've studied the subconscious a lot. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, so I do hypnotherapy. I studied for a long time to get my degree, and I love subconscious conversations and work, because along with MDMA and that's the next up and coming therapy that everybody is going to be doing. Yes. And our subconscious, its first directive is to keep us safe, right? Yes. And so when you said, even when the thought of divorce came up, it still didn't feel bad. It's because your body knew it wasn't bad, right? Yeah. And it was trying to keep you safe in that knowledge. And so, the inner child work, which is something, again, I think is a next up and coming big field of stuff. I've done a couple things with my own hypnotherapist that I work with, and there is nothing harder than inner child work. It's devastating. It's like, and I recently talked to a kind of like a medium, and my inner child came to her, and I was like a mess. I'm like, it's so hard. So I just want to validate that work that you did is incredible. And like, I'm sure, when you say it's life-changing, I have no doubt it's life-changing, because we tend to think of ourselves as, like you said, so disconnected from ourselves, but that little girl still exists as like its own body. It's her own entity, right? Yeah. Okay, so you did this stuff and you went through the journeys. Did it help the anxiety?
Yes, it did. It did. I think, I'm always going to I'm going to settle into this new being even more. Every day it's going to get better. But yes, it definitely answered my questions of like why I don't feel safe. Listen, we protect ourselves. I'm amazed at our ability to survive this life, right? Our psyches are so adaptive.
Yeah.
And so, I'm grateful for what my body did for me for the first 40 years, but I was ready to not hide from it anymore, right? And so you're only ready for it when you're ready for it. I was ready for it then. And so I think now, I see everything about my life differently. It really is two versions of myself. I don't know that everyone who does MDMA therapy has such a strong, but like it really did for me. It really changed everything. And so I feel more, again, when you don't have access to yourself, you can't be an authority in your own life. Yes. And so I've ceded authority in my life every step of the way. I was an evangelical Christian in my adolescence. Ooh, great. Somebody else tell me what to do. Yeah. Then I, started dating my husband when I was 23 and just stuck with him despite red flags, because I was like, I just want someone else to orient around. Don't leave me by myself. I don't know what to do on my own. Yeah. And so when I left my marriage, and I don't think this is uncommon, it was the first time that I was my own authority ever. I never lived life truly on my own terms. And to me, that's what grounds you. We're anxious when we can't live our own truth, our own needs. We can't prioritize ourselves. We're ceding that to other people, our kids, our husbands. But we're not, of course we're anxious. Yeah. When we can just be ourselves and go in for like, what do I need right now? The anxiety doesn't need to be there, because we're actually aligned with what we need.
Yes. Yeah.
So I feel like I'm able to live my life in a way I've never been able to. Obviously, also it helps that I'm not married anymore and I get to like live in my own house and set my own hours and have cats instead of dogs, all those things that like, that helps too. But it really, so yeah, I would say the anxiety is much better. Also, I'm not in a marriage that isn't serving me and I don't understand. The other piece I think is our bodies give us information and we ignore it. And we override it. And so that's why we're anxious because guess what? Our bodies are like, this isn't right. This isn't right. We do something about this situation that you're in. Yeah. We ignore it. So I think I'm learning to listen to my body too, which is not easy. And again, after 40 years of just being like, please stop irritating me with whatever reaction you're having. Now I'm like, oh, body, what's going on? You have information for me. Let me something about it.
I love that.
You know, as women too, we're so like the first thing they teach us is to be disconnected from our bodies, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you know, with the food and the even like raising your hand to go to the bathroom in school, like things like that, where it's just like they teach you to be disconnected from your intuition. And then I see so often once we sort of start getting in touch with it, we farm that out to other things like, oh, it's a download or something like that. And it's like, no, that's you. You're the authority in your body. You're telling yourself that. It's like you said, you are the generator of these ideas. But I think our work so often as millennial Gen X women is to get back to being in touch with our bodies because they've done nothing but try to disconnect us from it the whole time.
Yes. No, they're still doing it. I mean, I have a 13-year-old who's constantly like, they won't let me go to the bathroom. Like, and I'm like, how are they still doing this today in 2024?
It's a normal human function. You have to pee.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say.
It's the food. It's for sure. It's the food. It's the bathroom. It's the sexuality. So like our bodies are dangerous. How much we're taught like, oh, what you're wearing is causing others to be distracted. Like we are the source. Our bodies are just shamed. That's all it is. We get shamed for them. They don't look right. They're too tempting. They're not tempting enough. Like no wonder we just go and we cut off access and we live in our heads.
Right.
But I mean, that is just not the way to live. I mean,
it's not the way forward.
I think I see so many women right now just trying to do the work of embodiment and it's not easy. We're like having to learn like the ABCs of our body because 100%. No one ever taught it to us.
Yeah. No, and you have to be safe. You have to feel safe to do that, right?
Yeah,
like you can't be embodied in a marriage that isn't safe for you, or a friendship that's not safe for you, or a job that's not safe, whatever it is. Like you have to like, and so it's like this cycle, right? Of like you do the inner work, then you have to fix some of the stuff outside, then you have to go back and do the inside. Then it's like constantly this like dance. I really liked what you said before, and I wanted to go back to it about when something kind of excites you and gives you that spark to follow that, because again, that goes exactly with this conversation. But I've been thinking a lot about that too, especially as a writer and a creator, when something kind of gets stuck in our head and we follow that thread, right? I think that's intuition, right? Like that's telling us something. So what happened to your writing? Now, I want to also say too, you stopped working totally during the pandemic. You just focused on the kids.
Yes, but I realized that I had to write. Like the need to write didn't go anywhere. So this is when I started writing in my own voice for the very first time. I have written in my own voice since college. And so I was like, ooh, what does my voice sound like? And so I did a lot of like playing around. So I was still writing, but of course I was making any money doing it. And I do think like I started my Substack in, I want to say November of 2021. So the Substack really grew out of this opportunity to test out my voice and see what I wanted to say. So that's kind of where it came from.
But that's a huge like identity shift, right? As a writer, to be like, I'm getting paid for my writing, and like being a paid writer is really hard in this world. And so to go from that to then not getting paid for your writing had to have affected you.
It did. And I mean, honestly, I didn't realize it, but like my marriage didn't work with me not earning.
That's fascinating.
Not for him, but for me. I could not tolerate that I was like essentially a housewife. I couldn't. I was dying. Even though I signed up for it. He didn't ask me to quit. I said, listen, he was a financial planner. He was making most of the money anyway. And like, so I was like, I'll just do it. You know, the patriarchy was still so much in my head.
Yeah.
Which like, this is what you do.
Yeah.
But yeah, it did not work for me at all. And I didn't know that. You don't know that until you're in it, that like being fully dependent on him and in that role it revolutionized something in me. And that's when I really started looking at some of the constructs of motherhood. And, you know, the motherload started with like me interrogating motherhood, thinking that was what was stopping me, which it was in some ways. But then it just kept going to marriage. And then I was like, maybe it's not the motherhood.
Bingo.
Yeah. Problematic. Maybe it's the marriage. And then of course, then all of a sudden I'm getting divorced. And I was like, well, this took a plot twist I was not expecting.
Yeah.
So you wake up, so you're on this journey and you wake up and you have this very clear message.
Yeah.
That I don't want to be in this marriage anymore. I've had messages like that, but it's more like I can't live here anymore. Like it's like very clear, like I'm done here. So I understand the clarity of it. What happened next? You get in the car, you drive home, and then what happens?
Well, you can't drive home because you're so high.
Okay.
First step, yep.
I'm sure. Because I mean, you're not really supposed to drive after that. You know, I mean, at first I was elated because I think, first of all, the medicine was still like, woo!
Yeah.
I was shocked. I was devastated, but there was also a lightness to me. Like, I was like, because I think anyone who has left a marriage knows that the in-between, the am I staying or am I going? Like, what's wrong here? That's the hardest part.
Yeah, 100%.
The hardest part is not knowing whether to leave or not. And that time can last so long.
Yeah.
And so once it was like clear, I was relieved.
Yeah.
But I will say I then so we had couples therapy a few days later, and I told him in couples therapy, I like couldn't tell him, which maybe wasn't the right choice, but I wanted to tell him in a supported setting. I was terrified to tell him this news. And then I felt like I kind of wanted to backtrack. I was like, oh, well, maybe I just need, I panicked, I will remember one moment in particular where I had gone. So I think at that point we decided to kind of try and spend time apart, but like not tell our kids anything yet. And so I was somewhere where I wasn't with him and I was turned on the TV and I was trying to decide what to watch. And my head was still like, oh, but I don't want to watch that without him. I'll save that to watch with him. And then I was like, oh my God, like, no, you're never going to watch stuff with him again, which sounds silly.
No,
like,
it doesn't.
Watch TV shows with our spouse, right? Like,
that doesn't
that's
sound silly.
Bonding activity. And you've done it. I was with him for almost 19 years. Like, I watched things with him.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God. It was a panic of like, what have I done? Like, I'm never going to watch TV shows with him again? That doesn't sound right. Even like, so
no, it's all the dismantling of all the small things that make a life together. I mean, it's not insignificant.
No, I know. So funny that it was like the TV shows that kind of got me, but it was the TV shows that kind of got me because it was like the one like relaxing thing we did together. I didn't want to parent or cook for him anymore, but like, let's watch some reality TV together.
Yeah.
So that's about it. So So that was hard. And I kind of wavered a little bit and like, well, maybe we just need a separation, all the things. So we ended up doing, like a nesting separation kind of situation where the kids stay put and we just cycled in and out. But so I realized I wanted to, like, that journey was in August, early August. And we did not tell the kids until October because my oldest was about to start middle school, the start of the school year. Like, it just felt like too much. But, kids notice. And so I will tell you my younger one, at one point, she was like, so is this just how it's going to be now? Like, you and Dad, like, taking turns who's with us? This was before we were even nesting. She noticed what was happening. So we told them that, we were going to do this we didn't even use the word separation. We just kind of said we were having a hard time and we needed some space. And that was in October. And we did that all the way through the holidays. And then we had said that, like, come January, we'd talk and see how we were feeling. But like, even in January, we got through the holidays somehow, but it's so hard to be like, that's it. Like, we're done. Like, no, but yeah, I don't want to like move back in together. Like, and we were getting really tired of the nesting. So I knew somebody needed to move out. And so I think I suggested that I would move out and start looking for a place. And it all just kind of happened very quickly, that it was like the very end of the holiday break. And I was going somewhere with the kids, and he was then going someplace else. I don't know. What ended up happening is he lied to me. And I knew, my body was like, the feeling like you're being lied to. And I confronted him. He still lies to me. And then I can see that he's lying to me because, you know, we're women. We know how, like, look at the credit card statements, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I hate this feeling so much. I never want to feel this way again.
Yeah.
The only way I know that I will never feel this way again is if we're done. And that was my moment. And I said, that's it. And when he came back in town, I said, it's divorce. And we're telling the kids right now. And like, I was so done. Yeah. And so even though that was a really painful moment, I'm so glad that it gave me the clarity, because I was like, I can't do this anymore. My body feels so horrible being lied to by the person that is supposed to love me.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, but you wouldn't have felt all that, right, if you hadn't done all those journeys and the MDMA. Yeah.
Yes, it was the ultimate of like really listening to my body and its wisdom, which was like, you hate this. You hate this. Listen to me. I'm saying get out. And I listened to it, you know, and again, without all that work, you override. Listen, we are, all of marriage is set up to override the bad feelings we have. That's how we stay married. And the whole institution is set up for us to stay. And so it's so revolutionary when we can get to that point to say, I'm done overriding how I feel about this situation, and I'm getting myself out. But that,
you know, freedom. It is freedom. And so many things. I have been thinking a lot about this conversation and a lot about the work you do. And I saw some sort of tweet the other day that said, what is something that should be free and isn't? And I immediately jumped to divorce, right? Divorce should be free. It should be free. Marriage is what? You pay for what? The marriage license? Yeah. You can get married, right? And so I would love for you, you know, to kind of talk about some of the work you've been doing with the mother load and a lot of the work around the financial aspect of divorce, because you've been digging into it way more than we even dig into it at Fresh Starts here. So what have been some of the insights that you've been finding? Because I feel like, and I don't know what you're working on, but clearly there's some sort of book there that has to come out eventually, because you're really digging into it. So what are you finding from people?
Yeah. No, I mean, I feel so hopeless about the institution of divorce is so broken and so exploitative. And I mean, I am someone who comes, like, I have resources, and it has pushed me to the point of death. And I am someone who has resources. Like, if it's this bad for me, I cannot even imagine what it is like for other people. It is financially devastating.
Yes.
And I don't know how to get around that. You know, not just the divorce process itself, which, yes, is horrible. And again, I'm still like, I really want to interview someone who has done it through divorce.com, because I think I love that they're offering that. But again, for people with complex estates, it's like, I don't know if that's possible. But, you know, it's the other piece of it is that it's not just the cost of divorce, which is horrible, and it shouldn't be so hard. But it's that our world is still set up for dual income households. Like, how many people do I know who are trying to get divorced, but they can't even afford for someone to move out?
Right.
That is just reality.
Yeah.
Because rent is so much and mortgages are so much, so they can't afford the mortgage with just one person. I have a whole, next week is my post on mortgages and marriage, because you have to essentially refinance, which we all know is a disaster right now. Who refinance with rates at 7% when we all refinanced at 2.5%? Your actual mortgage payments, now you not only have to do it by yourself, it's double or triple. Someone explain to me how that's fair.
It's not. It's not. And I want to just say too, for anybody listening, so I refinanced my house during my divorce, but the spiral of emotions goes so deep, right? And because I will be honest, in my divorce papers, it said if I couldn't refinance and buy the house back myself within, I think it was a year, then I had to sell the house, right? Now, my son was in first grade at the public school in a great school district with his friends that reportedly he was going to grow up with, right? I was going to stay there for a while. So in my head, I'm thinking, if I can't refinance, this doesn't just ruin my life, but my kid's life, right? This is like his future. So there's so much at stake when it comes to finances and divorce that it's so much bigger. I talk a lot about the health insurance aspect, right? Like I said this yesterday on my social media, I could only get divorced because of the Affordable Care Act. That was the only way I could. My ex-husband moved out of state, so he couldn't even cover the kids on his whatever. So I'm just grateful that you are digging, to putting your journalist hat on and digging into this a little bit, because I think that it needs to be very clear to people when they get married that half of people, 50% of people will end up divorced, which we obviously are very pro-divorce, but it does affect your entire life. It's huge.
Well, we've done this insane thing where we've bonded, just like we've taken health insurance and connected it to work, which is crazy. We've bonded romantic love and contracts. Yeah. And it's like this very weird thing because one, you're, and I think often by the time you get to the divorce point, you're the romantic love that breakup's done. That's done. And now you're just left with basically breaking up an LLC in effect, right? It's the same. And so it's this crazy thing where call it what it is, it's a business transaction, and it's super unfortunate that was also muddled up with love and romance and sex and indiscretions and promises made. It's just this is insane knot that you have to untie.
Yeah. And, again, I do all this digging to hopefully find solutions. I haven't found the solutions yet on this divorce piece. And maybe, there's a part of me that I'm there need to be changes in the mortgage industry. Yeah, they're due. Because the other piece that I get angry about is that the mortgage industry is so set up for W-2 employees. They don't like freelancers because so women, even if they can't, how do you qualify for that loan? And because you were a mom, you went to freelance or built your own business because you can be a W-2 employee when you're also a mom. Some of us, but not many of us. So we transition, but then we can't be qualified for loans. The whole system is still so set up for a white male breadwinner to get the loan. So the whole thing is broken. So yes, I will, because I can't take off this hat of mine that likes to dig and then do something about it. So could I see myself really becoming, I don't know. I'm going to talk to people about the mortgage thing. I think it's really, really, it's a way that women get just really kind of obliterated. They're can't hold the wealth the way men can because they keep the houses. And then their kids are impacted. Again, I've already gone on this whole thing about postnuptial agreements. And I do think that helps some, so that before you get divorced, you talk with your spouse about how you are going to deal with all of this so that you're not having to have an expensive divorce because you've kind of already hashed it out before you're divorced. I think that can be beneficial. That's one way to save on some of the costs of divorce. But, it's kind of a Band-Aid. I think all of it is broken.
First of all, that's the title of your book. It's all broken. But also, I think you made a really good point. There are very few divorces that are actually really lovely and people can work on that, not complex. Most divorce is somewhat complex in some way, right?
Especially when there's kids. I have friends that got divorced. I have a friend that got divorced and I was like, who is your divorce attorney? She was like, I didn't use one. They didn't have kids. It was easy peasy because, but that's super unusual. And I think that, what you're talking about is so important because not only is it mortgages, it's rentals too, right? You can't, it's hard to get a rental. They just lock you in. And I think, we're staring at an election in front of us too, where there's our protections are being stripped in so many various ways potentially. And I just think it's vital work. It's really, really vital work because what we're talking about is liberation and what we're talking about is freedom and safety for everybody, right? Everybody deserves to be in a happy home and to feel safe.
Yeah. And I think, listen, there are so many people doing wonderful divorce content, and I would like to eventually transition myself away from divorce land, but, still where I'm at. But I do feel really strongly about pulling back the curtain on the money aspect of it, how much it costs, how much support that people are getting, what happens when we stop paying support. There's all this stuff that we do not talk about sex, we do not talk about money. And thankfully things are starting to change on both of those. But for me, I really want to talk about the money aspects of divorce, because I think it's just this piece that's still hidden because we feel shame about it. Listen, I don't love going into debt. Nobody wants to go into debt. It seems ridiculous. And also, I have to tell you, I have had to realize how afraid I am about money. There is a panicked little girl in me, talk about inner child work, who is so scared about anything to do with money. And I think half the reason I chose my spouse, listen, he's a financial advisor. I saw him and I said, great, I will never have to do anything around money again. I shoved it over to him so that part of me felt like, I never have to worry about money again. Well, guess what?
Yeah, now you're going to write a book about it. Yeah. I think it's again, the work you're doing is so important, but it's not just divorce. It's motherhood, it's womanhood. It's the way that the world is set up to just keep knocking women down again and again and again. And, with, how many women have to go find a job, after the divorce, but then they can't pay for childcare, right? So they have to be done by 3:00. I mean, the stipulations in my divorce settlement alone were insane. And, it was like, because I have my own business, so I work from home. So that wasn't really considered work. Right. And so they had all sorts of stipulations around that. I had to pay for all the childcare myself if I wanted to work from home, which I did because I own my own business.
By the way, you didn't have a choice financially to not work from home because he wasn't paying for anything.
Right. So, it's just wild. So I just appreciate that you are taking the time in your life. And if that is what led you here to do this work, then we're excited to support you through that. Okay, Cindy. So if somebody is going through a fresh start, what would be some wise words that you can impart to them?
I mean, I think fresh starts are the greatest thing in the world. I mean, I love this phase of my life. I feel like it's a whole new chapter I didn't even think I was going to get. And I know there's a lot of fear around fresh starts, and you can be like, oh, I thought it was going to be, but now it's like a big question mark, and it could be anything. And to me, I think fresh starts are so exciting because you're like, I don't know where that path is going. We're primed to the known path, which is like, here's this person and we're going to grow old together and blah, blah, blah. But like, really, is that exciting? No, I like the adventure. So I would just say, try and see any fresh start is like a path with the horizon in front of you and you don't know where it's going. And that is a good thing.
I love that. Yeah. Love it. Love it. Love it. What was the last thing that you ate and truly loved?
I made some pumpkin bread this week because we're like feeling the fall feels. And my older daughter was like, please, she always gets the pumpkin loaf at Starbucks because she's 13 and Starbucks is like
life. Yeah.
But I was like, well, I can make some pumpkin bread, and it was pretty delicious. So
that sounds great.
I love that. Well, okay. Tell us how people can read your work and follow you and find you and all the things.
Yeah. So my Substack is the Motherload. So you can just Google Substack and the Motherload and I pretty much come up. I'm Cindy DiTiberio on Instagram. Those are my main places. I mean, I have my own website where I am publishing. I occasionally get published other places. And I do have a book that I am still working on, and it will be published, and it's called Ghost, which I think is pretty cool because I was a ghostwriter, but I also learned to ghost myself. And it's really a book about all of this stuff. It's about the MDMA stuff. It's about leaving the marriage. It's about finding my inner little girl and my sense of self and my true sense of agency, which feels amazing, and I just want that for every woman to like really at some point become their own authority and live life according to their own terms, because it's the greatest feeling in the world.
I love that you said ghost yourself. So there's a whole other conversation there, Cindy. We
can't wait to read
appreciate it. I cannot wait to read the book. Thank you just for all the work you do and for being here. And you're welcome back anytime. So please.
I'd love to. We have more to talk about, I'm sure.
A lot. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to today's episode. A Fresh Story podcast is produced by Fresh Starts Registry, the first and only platform for everything you need to begin again, from home items to Hype Team and everything in between. You can learn more and read today's show notes at afreshstory.com.
Are you a freelancer, solopreneur, writer, creative, or professional looking to achieve your goals within a supportive community? Have you found that working from home on your own gets lonely? That you're missing the accountability and community of a positive workplace environment? We understand. And we're so excited to introduce you to the Fresh Starts Collective. For just $35 per month, gain access to 6 daily offerings a week, including virtual co-working, open office hours for business coaching, accountability sessions, and networking opportunities. Enjoy expert workshops, monthly events, and an extensive content library. Connect with marketing, design, and writing professionals to brainstorm and grow together. Surround yourself with accountability, community, and growth. Elevate your journey with the Fresh Starts Collective for only $35 per month. Visit freshstartsregistry.com and join us today.